Oh, well, hello there, and welcome to day 83 of A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. And today I am delving back into my Oscar nominees list with the Best Actress nominated The United States versus Billie Holiday, which of course is being led by Andra Day, who plays the titular Billie Holiday. And I've talked previously about films where the Oscars is a funny thing, and any awards-based system is really a funny thing, where of course you want to acknowledge the hard work that a particular performer has put in, and in spite of the quality of a film, that the work that particular person has put into their character building, particularly with when representing someone biographical. And I've also previously talked about the idea of the problem of biopics, and the idea that a film is a hard medium to condense, to tell the whole life story of a particular figure or character. And this is probably a prime example where there's really a imbalance between wanting to represent a figure, but so desperately wanting to both represent their character, the politics of the character, but also the story of that person, and the case where you're trying to tell as much about the story of that person as possible. I remember years ago when I did the film show, my colleague said to me about how I rather liked Aaron Sorkin's Steve Jobs film, because I liked the theatrical structuring of it, that we had 3 acts which depicted 3 different conferences, and there was something about the fact that it was an empty stage that just had characters from who would legitimately have been there but were prominent in Steve Jobs' life, who he interacts with, and we get a sense of his whole story, even though we only see it through the perspective of these 3 events. And the person at the time said to me, well, I can't stand that. I want a biopic that tells me the story of their life and shows it to me, rather than this stage play that gives us piecemeal versions of it. And that is a legitimate argument, but my case at the time, and still stands, is that this isn't a biography in the novel sense. You know, to try and cover every beat of a character's life within a 2-hour film, in this case, is an incredibly difficult thing to do without coming across like you're jumping into, oh, remember this bit, and of course we need to acknowledge this relationship with this person or this important event, and it becomes so desperately playing lip service that it forgets that it needs to tell a coherent story. And this is where this film really struggles, because Lee Daniels is a phenomenal director. I mean, I loved The Butler. I remember seeing The Butler years, about the actually same time as the Steve Jobs film, or within a year either side. And I thought The Butler was a really nice way to both tell a human story, but also use it as a basis to show the changing face of social and political American culture. And I really liked that. I really thought that was well done. And of course, going back to Lee Daniels' award-nominated and winning stuff, with all the way back with Monsters Ball, which he produced, and Precious, which he directed, and both of which I need to go back and watch, because they are blind spots in my current viewing, and I do want to see both of those films. But I genuinely think he's a great filmmaker. But this film, I'm hesitant to say, but it kept popping up in my mind. But this film felt very TV movie. And I know, yes, we're in the period right now where all films are TV movies, and this was, released for, well, I'm currently watching it on Now TV. But when I say TV movie, I mean it in that 90s, early noughties sense, where there are films that are cinema in its truest sense, that have a knowledge of the fact that this is going to be presented in a theatre, with the scale and the Dolby and the Atmos and just that true cinema authenticity. Whereas there are some films that, they're interesting watches, but they don't have the scale or the ability to tell the story in that way. And this really feels like that in places. The film is I had a real problem with the fact that this film jumps around in its narrative, constantly going backwards and forwards in time. And as much as I like narrative time travel, I think you can tell some really interesting stories and present particular character pieces in a really interesting way through jumping backwards and forwards. You have to have a reason for doing it. And I could not fathom, watching this, the reason for jumping backwards and forwards. So, and it does it in ways that are even more baffling than just doing it, because the film opens with text saying about the 1937 debate on making lynching in America illegal. But then the film opens in the 1950s, it seemed, although I had no indication of that's the time it was set, where we have a interview with Billie with some radio host of some kind, and then we jump back 10 years to then follow her life. And even then the film is still jumping backwards and forwards, by 2 months, by 3 months, and then it'll go back a year. And frankly, that's not good storytelling. It's really confusing. And I understand that certain biopics partially depend on the character being someone who you would have an idea of, or you have a basis for their story. But frankly, this is a film that I don't know Billie Holiday's life. I don't know her story. I don't know her, how important she was to American culture, and I wanted to learn these things. But I really struggled to get a grasp. And towards the end, I did start to piece it together, but I had to work fairly hard to go, okay, so this must have happened at this point and this. And frankly, that's work enough in itself. And then the first acts, maybe first half of the film, are very basic directing and writing. And it does a very frustrating thing where it's constantly trying to tell you how important Billie Holiday is, how important her music is in the Black Rights Movement and the revolution against the current American administration. But it's so desperately trying to tell you how important Billie Holiday is that it doesn't just let it happen. The obvious comparison is to Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Of course, they're running against each other in the Oscars, and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom managed to convey a really powerful character piece about someone who I didn't know anything about, and yet it's all set in one single day of her life. And yes, we don't know the biography of who she was through that film, but I got enough of a sense of her and who she was and how important she was and how she dealt with people and her relationships to different kinds of people in that one day, 10 times as much as I did going from Billie Holiday, in her early 30s, all the way through to the end of her life, and then part way jumping back to her child, like, and in that sense, it's a shame because, you know, I do think you could have got some really interesting beats in this. The section in which we go on tour with her, I think, is the strongest section. The film struggles because it feels like it's trying to do several things at once. The story follows this FBI agent named Jimmy Fletcher, who and again, real life person who's constantly tailing her and dogging her and gets her essentially sent to prison. But as a black man in the FBI, he's conflicted. And then when he follows her on tour, they develop a romantic relationship. And that section of the film's really strong, where you really genuinely get a sense of Jimmy Fletcher, you get a sense of Billie Holiday, you get the world in which they exist, and you think, and of course the drug use, and how on the one hand the drug use is difficult because it is, you know, these are hard drug users, and you'd think that would be hard to sympathise with, and yet you understand where they've come from and why that they have come to this, particularly in Billie's case. And if the film was about that would have been enough. But the film also, so you think the film might be about Jimmy Fletcher and him following her, and you think the film will be about an overall look at Billie Holiday, but then you think, oh, there's a section where she goes to prison, and you think, oh, well, the film's called The United States versus Billie Holiday, and though that's metaphorical, you think, oh, well, maybe that's going to be a prominent part of it, but it isn't. That's explored through montage. And frankly, it's so conflicted in what kind of film it's trying to be that it really, like, watching it, you're thinking, well, like, is Jimmy Fletcher my main character or Billie? And, oh, there are people who come into her life who clearly are being paid lip service. But frankly, you'll get a scene with her first husband and you think, oh, their relationship will be important, but then you never see him again. And you don't even sort of get an acknowledgement of their divorce. Or Natasha Lyons, who I know from Orange is the New Black and Russian Doll, plays her sometimes lover. But again, this character only gets 2 scenes, and you know, with Billie Holiday being a queer woman, you think, oh, well, that will be a really interesting side plot and the sort of romance between them, but that's practically blink and you'll miss it. And even the second husband, Louis McKay, you think, you know, that relationship is you get the hints of it halfway through, and you think, okay, well, that's going to really be opened up, and it is, and it also isn't. And the pacing with all of these elements all going on, and all the characters you're just thrown in with, some of whom who were with her from the beginning of the film, and you don't really get a sense of who they are. They're just part of her posse. And it's very frustrating. It's a very frustrating watch, because I do think Andra Day genuinely gives a powerful performance. And when she has her moments to, she really does embody this charismatic, enigmatic figure who you just can't take your eyes off. And, you know, I wouldn't want to sort of put her side by side along Billie Holiday, but I imagine that, you know, she has the vocal ability that makes you think Billie Holiday, and looking at her, I would believe that she does play that kind of character so well. But it's just, like I say at the beginning, or like I said at the beginning of this, it's very hard to admire a great performance when it's bogged down by a substandard film. And yeah, and so it was a hard watch. And as I say, something like Ma Rainey's Black Bottom explores this kind of figure much better, or Judas and the Black Messiah explores a character similar to the Jimmy Fletcher character, but does it in a way where you go, oh, I actually get a really inside look at someone who is inside, who represents the American system and yet is a black man and essentially helping to take down the powerful black figures. And it's and with those two, so it's unfortunate this film would come out and would get the acknowledgement that it did alongside these two films, because frankly they're much better films. They're much more cinematic, and they do both those jobs better than this film does. And yeah, it's a shame, but it's just not good enough. And it's a shame because, like I say, Lee Daniels is a phenomenal director. Andra Day gives a phenomenal performance, but it just doesn't gel. And I am impressed that it won the Golden Globe for Best Actress. Unfortunately, things being what they are, I still haven't seen Promising Young Woman or Nomadland yet, but I will get to them, and maybe I'll get an understanding of why this won over those, with both of those being front runners. But hey, it wasn't a solid watch for me, I'm afraid. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. Go through my back catalogue of videos. If you subscribe to the channel and click the bell, you'll get notifications when new videos go up. If you could follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley. I tweet every day with links to the new videos. Thank you for joining me. Take care.